Greetings collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to episode 232 of Ask Boss Bounty. This is the weekly Q&A series that drops every Sunday, where I take your questions from the comment section below and do my best to answer them. So if you do have a question for next week's episode and you want to be featured in the video, be sure to leave that question in the comment section of this video, and hopefully you will be featured next week. With all that being said, if you do happen to enjoy this video, hit the like button down below, subscribe if you're new. And this episode of Ask Boss Bounty is brought to you by VC 132 Salt Murray. I did have a couple of choices here of which figure I would use to sponsor this episode that ended in 32. And they were all a little bit, I don't know, underwhelming, should I say. I think VC 32 is the Peasant Anakin, which has been reissued, and I think 232 was the Imperial Gunner, so I didn't really want to use him. And I've gone for 132, which is Salt Murray or Yak Face, and purely because this was a really groundbreaking figure at the time, and it's still an absolutely amazing figure. Of course, it's been reissued since, and you can now pick him up at Ollie's for like $3.99. So if you haven't got this figure, then I highly recommend it. It's an exceptional sculpt, really great paint apps, and of course you've got that special Power of the Force version that came with the barge. So it's a pretty special figure in the history of TVC, and that's why I've chosen him to kind of sponsor this episode. Okay then, so before we get on to this week's questions, I just want to talk about a few things. So first of all, the fact that I am actually losing my voice, so I do apologise on this video if I sound a little bit croaky and husky. Yeah, so that's the thing, I'm losing my voice. Yesterday was also the first ever SAF event, which is the Star Action Figures Collectors event here in the UK. Star Action Figures is an independent retailer online, which I've used for many years, and they held an event at their new offices stroke warehouse, and they invited Hasbro along, or Hasbro like collaborated with them, so it's pretty awesome. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there for all of it. I turned up pretty late in the day. I had other commitments going on, but there was loads of stuff going on online and live streams, not just for Star Wars, for Transformers and Marvel and stuff as well. And it was just awesome to get there when I did and talk to a few people, including a fan of the channel called Teddy. I want to give Teddy a big shout out. Teddy is a young collector. He was there with his dad, and he wanted to meet me and everything, which was just an awesome thing to see. And he's such a nice kid, and he is the future of collecting, everybody. And I thought it was just awesome him being there. He had a great time by the looks of it. I think he went home with a Black Series Droideka, but I think he's more of a TVC fan, which is always good for me. But yeah, he wanted to meet me, and he is a really nice kid, and it's just a pleasure seeing young kids like that getting involved in Star Wars and Star Wars figure collecting and things like that. So shout out to you, Teddy. Hope you had a great time yesterday, and keep watching the videos, buddy. Apart from that, they did have a lot of the new product on show for all lines, including the latest TVC wave, which is the Ahsoka the White wave, I call it, with the jetpack trooper and things like that. And Hasbro were very, very kind to let me take these home at the end of the day to review this week. I do have to send them back once I've reviewed them. They are not mine to keep, but I will review them. And of course, Patreon supporters, channel members, I will try to get those videos out as quickly as possible for you guys to watch early. And then each day next week, I will hopefully have a new review out for the channel. So be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. All right then, so let's get on to the first question, and it's from David Gherkin, and he says TVC 1.0 was partly doomed by a bad assortment of Phantom Menace figures. I fear too many releases from the widely despised Acolyte show could harm the line. Right now on Pulse, the pre-order for May is already discounted. Should Hasbro put limits on new media figures to determine if there is a market for these shows and focus on ones with established demand that have not been made? So first of all, of course, that is your opinion about the Acolyte. It wasn't one of my favourite shows. I feel that TVC should be made for everybody. That's my opinion on that. But what you're saying there is what they already do, my friend. If you look at it, we haven't really had that much from the Acolyte. We didn't really get much from Obi-Wan, and we didn't really get too much from Andor either. Now, I absolutely love Andor. I would like more figures from Andor, but it doesn't mean they're going to be doing it. And they do essentially wait to see if something is a big success, because you just have to look at the Mandalorian. At first, we got 2 or 3 figures, and then once it went boom, we've got now, I think, 40 plus. In fact, if you look at the numbers for TVC, and I'm going to be putting a whole video out about this, Mandalorian dominates after Return of the Jedi. And considering it's only, what, 3 or 4 years old, is quite amazing really. Out of 350 figures, over 40 of them are for the Mandalorian, which is quite a big chunk. So they're already doing it, mate. They're already doing it. As you know, when we look at the Ahsoka show here, we don't have a massive amount from Ahsoka. And if it's widely accepted as a really good show and they make a season 2, then we'll get more of it. And that's just as simple as that. Whereas Obi-Wan didn't really go down too well, and I can't really see them making too much more from that show. I think they pipelined that Obi-Wan with the goggles, the Nomad version. But after that, are we really going to be getting too much more, swathes of it? Absolutely not. Alfred Pedanu says, what was the best part of your trip to Florida? So I've got to say, apart from obviously the obvious things like going on the Falcon again, I love water parks. I went to Typhoon Lagoon, and the wave machine there is intense. It's just an amazing time. Me and my son absolutely loved it. Stephen Vasich says, hi BB, was just wondering, do you think we'll get an all new up-to-date Captain Phasma anytime soon, and would it be great if they did the Bad Batch in TVC as a multi-pack of all the characters carded on their own cards, or all the figures in one box like the Army Builder box, and that way you could get the whole group at once. Keep up the good work. Thanks. Absolutely, if we could get one of those carded 4-packs of the rest of the Bad Batch, that would be absolutely fantastic. Can't see it happening at all. There's a lot of tooling dollars that are going to have to go into doing that. As for Captain Phasma, unfortunately I can't see that one happening anytime soon. To be honest, I don't really feel that it's like an important enough character to get an updated figure of that. I mean, the figure isn't overly great, admittedly, but what did she really do in the films that she was in? Not too much. I saw her in the trailer, I thought, wow, this character looks fantastic, walking down the sort of Imperial tunnel, if you like, with all those lights around her. It just looked awesome, and then it's pretty underwhelming what she did in the actual films. That's just my opinion on it anyway. Stephen Burser, who has just become a channel member as well. Thank you so much, buddy. Really appreciate the support for the channel. He says, hi boss, great show as always. Just finished watching the interview of Mr. Stevie 2. In light of the insights shared for the plans ahead for an annual story to define the focus of new figures, etc., what would be your preference for 2026? I would really like a focus on the Jedi from the prequel era leading up to Order 66. Glad you had a nice holiday and look forward to the next set of reveals in September with the Hasbro Con. All the best, Steve. So yeah, I did actually forget when I was talking about the Star Action Figures Con, if you like, the collector's event. My part in that was getting an interview with Steve, along with Sith Lord as well. That is on the channel if you want to watch it. I thought it was a really insightful conversation. It wasn't really an opportunity to like bash Hasbro and do things like that. It's about celebrating the Star Action Figures Collector Con, but it's great to sort of put some questions to Steve, and if you haven't checked it out already, it's on the channel. In terms of what I would like for those mini beats, those stories that he was talking about across the years, and I actually love the idea of Order 66 for a start. Not just the Jedi, but just like an Order 66 mini beat would be awesome, because there's a lot of clones that I would love for them to do. Now we've got the new clone body, we could get a new Gree, a new Cody. I would love them to do the new Kashyyyk Trooper. You've got the Galactic Marines. There's so much of Order 66, not to mention all of the Jedis that you've just talked about there. So I think that's a huge shout out there for Order 66 beat. Other things that I'd love to see is like a revisit of Hoth, for example. There's a lot of Hoth that I would like for them to do still, including a new Imperial Hoth Stormtrooper, of course, which I've mentioned a few times before already. So there's a couple for you, buddy. Andrew Cook says, hi BB, just got my TVC Jabba the Hutt today and it looks so great. The box art really reminds me of the Kenner one I had as a kid. So my question for next week is, what classic Kenner sets would you most like to see redone for TVC? I wish they would do the Max Rebo Band or Hoth Defense playset with the turret and snow trenches. Yeah, absolutely. There's a few there. I mean, the Rancor Monster, I've got the vintage Kenner version of that. That's an amazing box. Also the Rebo Band, like you just said, but I'd want the European version with the actual box rather than the sort of open window version that you guys had in the States. I believe that was the case anyway. And then one that I would really love for them to do, and it's not something that I had as a kid, would be a Yoda's hut. I just used to love the box art for that. I think it looks fantastic. And I think we could do with a Yoda's house hut for Dagobah dioramas and things like that. I think that'd be pretty cool. Darth Burke says, hello BB, glad to see your videos are back after your holiday. Hope you had a relaxing time. It was great to see your pickups from your vacation. I enjoyed your video on the original 96. It was pretty informative. Thank you, buddy. He says, question for next week. With the reveal of Andor Season 2, we see the TIE Interceptor as a starring opportunity for this beautiful TIE to make its appearance. Do you think that this will get enough traction for a new updated Interceptor to be released in TVC. I know that the older Interceptors are rather expensive on the secondary market. I'd love to see and add a new one to my collection. Thanks for all the great content. I'm looking forward to seeing more videos. Best regards. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want a TIE Interceptor at all. I absolutely would, but I think maybe we kind of missed the opportunity with that because it had a starring role in the Mandalorian when it was chasing Bo-Katan. There was a few of them there, I do believe. I'm pretty sure they were TIE Interceptors anyway. So that would have been a really good opportunity to get that one out, and I'm not too sure why they didn't. Just one of those things. But, you know, the more and more these vehicles are in more and more medias going forward, new media especially, then I guess the bigger chance, you know, that we will get in getting them. Jared Cantor says, question for next week: if, as you say, Hasbro expects us to pony up for bigger figures these days that it releases as deluxe items, should it not also give fans a break if the upcoming Skeleton Crew wave has a lot of kid-sized figures to represent 4 of the main leads, who are all kids? Yeah, unfortunately, I know you're aware of this, Jared, it doesn't quite work like that, does it? Because the amount of sort of money that goes into the design and the tooling and all that doesn't really sort of differ between the size of the figures in terms of, like, the plastic doesn't actually cost too much more. And that's why Black Series and TVC figures don't actually cost too much more. There's not a big difference in terms of how much they cost to produce. What I would say is that when they re-release like R2-D2 with less deco, so we're now getting the clean R2-D2, right? It's an old mold. They've released it countless times, the Build-A-Droid mold. It's probably pretty cheap for them to produce that figure with less paint applications. Then I agree, something like that should be cheaper than a Yak Face, for example, that at the time was an all-new figure, amazing sculpt, you know, unbelievable deco, things like that. Jesse Presley says, question for next week: what is the makeup of your audience, US versus UK versus other countries? Well, I can put some screenshots up here of my analytics, and it says in the last 28 days that 46.7% of my audience is from the United States, 13.8% is from the United Kingdom, and then obviously we've got a bit of Canada and Mexico and Australia there as well. Of course, United States is always going to be the biggest, just purely because of the, you know, the demographics and the amount of people that you have in your country. I'll throw some other stats up there for you as well. So subscribed versus non-subscribed, 57.3% in the last 28 days that watch my videos are subscribed, which means a whopping 42.7% are not. So if you're watching this video right now and you enjoy my content, hit the subscribe button, because when I get about another 400 and something subscribers, I'll be hitting 30,000 and we'll be doing a big giveaway, so everybody wins. And also, having a look at another one here, you can just see the breakdown of age groups. So you can see that from 25 to 54 is where the bulk of my audience are, mainly with 45 to 54 year olds. And 95.4% of those are male. But it's also good to see that there is 4.6% female collectors out there. Manel Vicario says, hey BB, question for next week: I've always been a Star Wars collector, but as of late I've recently got into collecting G.I. Joe Classified, which is another brand under Hasbro. My question is, if Hasbro can put out a 6-inch vehicles that sell out immediately, why can they not put out vehicles for TVC? Example, I've just paid $100 for the G.I. Joe Classified Stinger that comes with an action figure. I understand they have to pay royalties, but if the demand is there, they should produce it. Thank you for always taking time out to answer our question. Well, buddy, you've pretty much answered your own question in your question, if you like. You talk about royalties there, and at the end of the day, the license fee for Star Wars, regardless of which toy company you are, is...
it's high.
Let's get going.
It's very high.
And also, of course, Hasbro, I mean, in the UK, for example, G.I. Joe Classified is exclusively on Hasbro Pulse. I don't think they even offer it to, like, the fan channels like Star Action Figures and things like that. So they can control their own stock and everything like that, you know. So I think it's a question for the retailers as well to ask, you know, why is there not as much Star Wars on a whole within those stores? Toribio Mendiola says, question for next week: do you think they will give us Cassian from Andor Season 2? I would imagine so, buddy. I would think that he is the most likely figure that we would get from Andor Season 2, apart from, you know, they've pipelined Dedra Meero, but at the end of the day, she's not going to change too much from Season 1 to Season 2, whereas we've seen from the leaked footage that, you know, Andor does indeed change. And of course, we've got that Black Series figure as well that's been revealed, and he is wearing his Season 2 outfit. So I'd imagine if they've done the digital sculpts for that, it's a lot more likely that we would see that one in TVC. And I think if they're going to do any figures for Andor Season 2, then it will be of the main characters first and foremost. Bigfoot Tech says, glad to have Ask BB back. Hope your Orlando trip was great. Do you think that we will start having remakes of old beasts up to the Blurg's standard? I'd love a new Tauntaun. So this is a difficult one to answer really, because when I think of beasts and things like that and creatures, ultimately I would like, you know, new beasts like the Blurg, like those dog things from the Ahsoka show. That would be a pretty cool release. So I don't really want them to go back and update ones that I feel maybe are okay, because to retool a new Tauntaun would be a lot of money, and I think this one is pretty good. It's got articulated shoulders, the back legs. Okay, it hasn't got knee joints, but they're kind of backward knees anyway, but it has got a hinge at the foot. You know, all in all, it looks really good. It's a great looking beast, that one. And of course we could go back as far as things like the ones from the Attack of the Clones, but you know, just from a on-shelf point of view, I think they look okay. So when we talk about creatures, I'd like them to do ones that desperately need updating, that have been in multiple medias, like the Dewback and the Bantha first and foremost. But apart from that, I'd like to see sort of newer creatures, as I say, such as those like dog rat things from the Ahsoka show. Joshua Davis says, hi Tim, question for next week. How do you think the community would react to a HasLab just for getting well-articulated carded figures of the Max Rebo band members into TVC all at once? Cheers. I don't think the collecting community would react badly if they were just in the line. Taking up a HasLab slot for the Max Rebo band, yeah, I don't think they'll react too well to that, to be honest. Nick Solo says, question for next week. If you could choose the next Bad Batch clone to be brought into the vintage collection, which clone would you choose between Wrecker, Tech, Omega, Crosshair and Echo? Out of all of the team, I would want Tech. You know, I think it's a lot different looking to the others. But then again, I do like what they did with Echo. I thought that was really cool with the missing arm and how he's more machine than man or whatever now. He was really cool, and he'd be a great looking figure as well. But out of all of them, Tech is probably the one that I'd want next. Wookie Sasquatch says, question for next week. Do you think the Razor Crest 2.0 being revealed in the Mando trailer, that Hasbro will re-release it in retail? Since they already have the tooling from the HasLab, I could see them releasing a different version, and if so, how do you think backers of the original would react? I've got to be honest, I don't think that will happen. I think so long as the HasLabs are continuing and the HasLab model is out there, that we won't get any re-releases of previous versions. It will just ruin the whole concept and model of HasLabs. I just can't see them doing it. If people suddenly start thinking that they're going to release them 5 years down the line in other methods, then people will never back another HasLab. It's just as simple as that. And also, we don't really know how much of it is going to be in the Mando, whether it is fully back. You know, it could just be a ship that he's on or whatever. I think Zeb was driving it, right? So we don't really know how much that particular Razor Crest, or if a Razor Crest, is going to be heavily used in that film. It could have just been a one scene and done. You know, we don't know at this point. Jower Merchant says, do you ever clean your figures, and if yes, how do you go about it? Yeah, I mean, if they've got particularly grimy or whatever, or especially with like vintage figures, when I used to pick those up, if I picked up one that needed a bit of a clean, I'd use like a baby wipe, we call them over here. Very, very, you know, those little sort of cloths that you can use. I also use like earbuds. I think in the States you would call them Q-tips, I think. You know, just to get in sort of the little crevices and things like that, to get built up grime and dust and things like that. Mr. Figment says, great video as always. Tim, question for next week. We've heard the Hasbro team say that a big portion of the TVC budget is going towards world building items. How many new figures do you think TVC is missing out on because of playsets and vehicles? Would it be better if Hasbro paused on all world building items for a couple of years so we could get caught up on figures? I'd hate to see vehicles, beasts and playsets disappear, but we're missing so many important characters. Thanks, keep up the good work. Oh man, I do love figures first, if you like, but you know, one of the reasons why I collect 3.75 inch is for the world building aspect of it. So, you know, I've wanted that Blurg for so long now, and finally we're getting it. I just feel we need those in the line. We need vehicles in the line. It's just one of those things that we have to accept being collectors of this scale. I'm not too sure if a huge portion of it goes on those. I would say some of it does, but we still get a certain amount of figures a year, not as many as we'd like. But ultimately, I wouldn't say, you know, stop all world building for a couple of years just so we can get, I don't know, 5 more figures or 6 more figures out there or something. I don't think it'd be worth it, to be honest. And I can't actually say how many figures we would get if we didn't do any more of that stuff, if I'm honest. 5 or 6 was what I just pulled out the air. Davin Carr says, question for next week, do you think it's time we got a new TIE Fighter pilot sculpt? I don't know if it's time. I would say it's one of the ones that definitely needs updating. I would like to see the TIE Fighter pilots more in Andor maybe, or some other show, and then that would, you know, kick Hasbro into gear of us wanting those and getting those. Because at the end of the day, this figure here, I mean, it looks okay, but it's truly awful in terms of modern articulation. It's got the swivel hips. It doesn't even have any ankle articulation whatsoever. I mean, we talk about, oh, we need figures with rocker ankles. He hasn't even got a hinge on his ankle at all. So, you know, going by that, yes, it is time that we got a new TIE Fighter pilot, but I realise with so much other stuff that we need, that one's half decent in terms of the way it looks on our shelves. So for me, it's not a massive priority. But then again, I'm contradicting myself slightly because I do want a new ATAT driver, and the one that we've got looks okay, very much like the TIE Fighter pilot looks okay. But I think that the ATAT driver is more about the card back, the classic Kenner card back, and the fact that he's just not in the vintage collection line at this moment in time. And I know a lot of carded collectors would want that one as well. So we do at the end of the day have a TIE pilot in TVC, and it's reissued as well. So they're plentiful. People have got them, but we don't have the ATAT driver. Django Camino says, hey Bossk, hope your holiday was good. Question for next week. Referring back to ships, specifically the likelihood of Django's Slave 1, do you think smaller ships like Darth Maul's Scimitar, Tyrannus's Solar Sailor, or Zamvessel's Speeder will be released in the near future? I've got to say, any of those, probably not. I think with vehicles, because as we're just talking about in the previous question, you know, they're few and far between, aren't they? We don't get them. Retailers don't seem to want them. Therefore, Hasbro don't seem to want to make too many of them. I do feel that we've missed the opportunity on Django's Slave 1. They should have released Django's Slave 1 instead of that Book of Boba Fett one. But of course, the Book of Boba Fett one was there to support that media. If the Django Slave 1 suddenly turned up in another new media, then that would give them the opportunity to do it, especially because we've got the new Django Fett as well. It is a bit of a shame that we don't have his ship. You can get it, but in that expensive like Clone Wars set. The other ones that you've mentioned there, I just don't think they have a big enough presence in the films or screen time to warrant sort of revisiting those and getting those out there, even though I would absolutely love a Sith infiltrator. I really, really would. When you look at the is it the E-Wing? Is that what it's called? That we're getting? You know, I honestly believe that one, because that's an all-new sculpt and things like that. A lot of money's been put into that one. And it is pretty cool, and it has been in sort of expanded universe in the past and things like that. But I honestly believe that when Hasbro were given the details of that one, they probably thought that it might be having more of a presence in the Ahsoka show rather than not much screen time at all. Because that one for me is a little bit of an odd choice. I've got to be honest with you with that one. It is cool, it's good, I'm going to be getting it. I love the droid that comes with it, but in terms of screen time, they didn't really have too much action. Do you know what I mean? So, you know, versus like a Darth Vader's TIE Fighter or something like that we desperately need an update on. So that's my opinion on those vehicles that you mentioned there. I just don't feel that they've had, like, you know, Zamvessel's Speeder, for example. As much as I think it's cool, I just don't think they'll ever revisit that. Owen Brown says, hope you had a very deserved break, Tim. My question for next week is, do you think we'll ever see a 3-pack of Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon and Maul Duel of the Fates like the Black Series got recently? Would love to see an updated versions of all 3 figures. Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of people would. The Qui-Gon that we've got isn't great. The Obi-Wan certainly needs updating. And the Darth Maul, you know, when you see the new Black Series 1, then you definitely get figure envy, and we would love that as well. I think they've probably missed the boat on the Phantom Menace, because this year we don't seem to be getting any of that. So I think it's probably more important that we push for a new Obi-Wan and Anakin from Revenge of the Sith, although that might be too late for next year's anniversary as well. But, you know, at the end of the day, out of all those 3, I would love the new Darth Maul that they've done for the Black Series in TVC. I think the one that we have, it really isn't good enough. But as I say, I think we've probably missed the boat, because the anniversary is this year and they'll be looking forward, not back. Alright then guys, that's it for this week's video. I do apologise about my voice. Man, I can't talk anymore. I've got to stop this video. But thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Hit the like button down below, as I mentioned before. And if you have a question for next week's episode, please leave it in the comment section below. Thank you to my Patreon supporters and channel members as always for supporting my channel. Don't forget, those reviews of the new wave will be up next week for you all to view. Thanks for watching, everybody, and we shall see you on the next one.